Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Skylar Kuhn, and I'm Assistant Director of Admissions here at Washington College. I'm very excited tonight to introduce our four panelists, who are all alumni of Washington College and involved in our Watershed program for alumni volunteers. All four of them are now working within the field of health, and they'll share how their time at Washington College helped them to launch these careers. Joining me tonight are Suzanne Hughes, Steve Hutner, Alex Hoffman, and Mike Powell. We will begin tonight with each panelist introducing themselves and answering some frequently asked questions, and then we'll end with a Q&A session. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to send in questions for our panelists, and you're welcome to start sending in those questions whenever you think of them. If we're unable to answer your question live tonight, we will make sure to follow up with you later, as long as we have a name associated with the question. So keep in mind that if you're going to submit your question anonymously, we won't be able to get back to you just because we won't have a name associated with that question. We've allotted 1 hour for our session tonight. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to hand the floor over to Suzanne.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome. My name is Suzanne Hughes. I'm a class of 91, and I'm currently a physician assistant with a Baltimore hospital, and I'm part of what's called a stroke team. And I see patients primarily on the outpatient side after they've already been treated in the hospital. And so I do all the follow-up visits for our stroke patients.
Good evening to everyone. My name is Stephen Hutner. I also graduated in 1991, same as Suzanne. I currently work as a senior research coordinator at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine at the Center for Child and Community Health Research. I oversee several different field and behavioral research studies in Baltimore City. My specialty has mostly been in adolescent and adults around STIs, drug use mostly. Currently now I am also been added on to some COVID type studies as well.
Good evening, I'm Alexander Hoffman, and I graduated in 2011, and I am currently an adjunct professor of public health at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and I'm also a public health consultant focusing on adolescent and college health behaviors, specifically alcohol and drug use, and a little bit now with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and alcohol and substance use.
Hi everyone, my name is Mike Powell. I graduated in 2011 from Washington College. I am now a dentist. I have a practice that is limited to dentoalveolar surgeries, removable prosthetics, implants, things like that. And yeah, I'm down in Florida, a little bit further south, but looking forward to answering some questions from you all tonight. Thanks.
Thank you all so much for being here. So we're going to get started with the first of our frequently asked questions. And I know you all already said your job title, but will you just tell us more about your current job? So what is your day-to-day like? And again, we'll start with Suzanne.
Hi there. My day-to-day. Oh, goodness gracious. Not only do I take care of my own patients for the post-stroke follow-ups, but I'm also seeing patients for my attendings, especially if one of my attendings, when he is on call serving the hospital for stroke and interventional radiology, because he is an interventional radiologist, meaning he gets to help folks when they have a stroke or a aneurysm, and he can either coil an aneurysm or he can remove a clot from a person's brain. So oftentimes when he's on call, I get to fill in and see all of his patients. I also take care of messages, filling prescriptions, basically running around like a chicken with my head cut off. So that's me as a current physician assistant. And if it's okay, I'll go ahead and dive into how I got into being a PA. So junior year at Washington College, I happened to be taking a medical ethics class, and part of that class took us to Johns Hopkins Hospital to do a mock medical ethics meeting with folks in the oncology department at Hopkins. Long story short, that meeting we had at Hopkins gave me the opportunity to be introduced to a Dr. Stuart Grossman, who was head of neuro-oncology at the time, as well as Dr. Michael Colvin, who was also in oncology, and they gave me the opportunity to have an internship between my junior and senior year, which helped me to write my senior theses. And it also introduced me to Dr. Stuart Grossman's physician assistant, who I got to go on rounds with. And that was my first introduction as to what a physician assistant is, what their capabilities are. And my road of getting to become a physician assistant was not the straight and narrow by any means, because I have a degree prior to going to getting my physician assistant degree. But it gave me that desire and knowing that I really want to be in the clinical space. I actually have a master's degree in research prior to getting my PA degree, and I knew that while I was getting my master's, I had no desire to go get a PhD because I didn't like the lab. I needed to be with people, and I needed to go into the clinical space, and that's how I became a physician assistant.
So my day-to-day as a senior research coordinator at Hopkins is I am the person who oversees grants and research studies. So I'm working daily with MDs and PhDs. We get funding through a myriad of different sources, some government, some private entities. I work currently on 5 different research projects. I oversee a staff of phlebotomists and nurses and research assistants and interviewers. So we're building up databases, we're we're recruiting participants, consenting them, enrolling them, doing interviews with them, collecting biological specimens for them, following up with them. We're collecting all this data, we're synthesizing all this data. We're making sure that participants are being protected, the study goals are being met. And then at the end of a study, then we take all that information and it's put together, it's analyzed by our team. We present our findings at different conferences throughout the US. And then hopefully it's, our findings are then published into peer-reviewed journals. My area, like I said, of expertise is I spent a lot of time working with IV drug users in the needle exchange program in Baltimore City. I've done work with some other marginalized populations in Baltimore City. I've done work with exotic dancers in Baltimore City, both cis and transgender street-based sex workers, and also with the gay and lesbian population, particularly around the usage of apps and STIs. How I kind of fell into public health, I was actually a political science major at Washington College. And I kind of started to realize that political science was good, but I think public health came to me actually in a philosophy class when we were discussing medical ethics and enrolling people into research studies. And I kind of realized that public health is a combination, a little bit of everything, to try to do the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of the population. And that's how I kind of fell into public health, and I've been involved in public health now for going on 30 years.
So currently I'm teaching 2 classes, a substance abuse education and prevention class, and a mental health and wellness promotion class that I built specifically for COVID-19 and the pandemic. So we have a textbook, but all of the assignments and discussions and quizzes are really based about mental health and COVID-19. And that's really relevant because my students are mostly in Alabama and the Southeast, where the pandemic is sadly not being controlled at the local or at the state level. And I also do public health consulting. So I work with local, state, county, city officials and groups, as well as some national groups. And like Steve had just said, I also do a lot of writing and data analysis, which I really enjoy. So I'm currently working on 3 different manuscripts, 2 looking at alcohol use and bystander behavior among college athletes, which was my doctoral dissertation, and 1 on risky sexual behaviors among NCAA varsity athletes. And all 3 I'm hoping to submit to peer-reviewed journals by the end of January.
Okay, so I don't do anything with grants or research or anything. I'm on the clinical side again here. So my practice, it's a little bit different than many dental practices. I don't do any of the typical fillings or crowns or anything like that. The practice I own, we see anywhere from about 50 to 75 patients a day. And what we typically do is they will come in for a consultation, and many of my patients have not had access to dental services, medical services, lower socioeconomic status patients. And so we offer services at a reduced rate, and they'll come in, and typically what I do is we take all of your teeth out. And depending on what funds are available, you know, we may do some implants, but then we do a lot of dentures, partial dentures. And so I do a lot of consults with patients, you know, where we take x-rays and then we meet with the patients and come up with treatment plans. And from there, I have an on-site dental laboratory actually that will be able to make all the prosthetics for the patients. And so if they'd like to have the surgery done the same day, we make that available to them, and we would take impressions and get that to my lab. We'd then make the temporary dentures or prosthetics for them. And so then I would see them back in the afternoon, and I would do a full mouth extraction typically. We do procedures called alveoplasties or torectomies, where we're reshaping the bones to make the dentures and the prosthetics fit a little bit better. We may be doing implant placement with that. Basic dental alveolar surgeries, kind of the bread and butter of my practice. And, you know, I would say I do probably between 3 and 4 surgeries on average a day. I would say a good 50% of my day is spent elbows deep in people's mouths and blood and spit. But it's really nice. We're able to do kind of a smile makeover almost in exactly 1 day for them. So that's a lot of the clinical side of things. You know, there's also a huge component of the business side where I do run, you know, quite a large practice. And so there's a lot of business things that I didn't necessarily get in dental school that I've kind of had to pick up, you know, afterwards and learn, which has been really fantastic. I think all of us in the health professions would agree it's kind of a lifelong learning. And this is, you know, one area I've learned a lot. And I had a kind of a very different way of coming into the health professions. I'd always wanted to be a doctor or a veterinarian or something like that. And I'd done some internships while I was in college, and one of them with oral maxillofacial surgeons. And while I'm not that specialty and I'm an implantologist, that really did spark my interest in surgery, especially dental surgeries. But when I got to college, I started off as a biology major, and I quickly found out that was not going to work well for me. And so I have a huge passion for art, actually, and I was an art and art history major in college. And then from there went on to do a doctorate in dental surgery at the University of Maryland. And I actually think it's a fantastic combination, one that people don't often think of, but there's a huge science component, you know, which obviously I did my prereqs and everything and learned a lot about that in dental school too, but really there's a lot of artistry with that. And when I'm sculpting bones, or when other dentists are sculpting teeth, you know, and crafting smiles, it can be really creative outlet too, which is fantastic. So that's a little bit about my day and how I got into this.
Thank you all. All of your jobs sound really interesting. And I'm sure we have a lot of questions out there. So just a reminder, if you do have a question for us tonight, feel free to type it into that Q&A box. We are going to go to our second question now. So how did Washington College's internship opportunities or out of classroom experiences get you all to where you are today in your careers?
So as I had mentioned earlier about the connection I had getting the opportunity to go up to Hopkins for a medical ethics meeting, and then being introduced to a physician assistant doing rounds while Dr. Grossman, he was a neuro-oncologist, and so therefore taking care of some very sick people. But it just gave me the taste of seeing what the opportunity could be as a physician assistant. And as I had mentioned earlier, I really didn't go the straight and narrow. After Washington College, I went and worked full-time in the AIDS vaccine program up in Frederick doing research, while they actually paid for me to get my master's in biomedical science. So as I was getting my master's degree and working in this very intense research lab, I kept saying this was not it because I felt isolated. I wasn't working with other people. So I actually started volunteering again. I did volunteered at a local hospital, and then just took 2 years to do what I needed to do to get into physician assistant program, which happened right after grad school. So I didn't really start my my second career until I was in my late 20s, early 30s, which was actually okay because Washington College gave me that foundation of my sciences, my critical thinking, and that road of going through working in research and then becoming into clinical gave me a stronger foundation than I think than I ever would have had. And as a physician assistant, I've done things, neurosurgery, internal medicine, hospital administration. I taught at a physician assistant program, and now I'm back to what I love the best is neurology, and I wouldn't have changed it for any other way.
So what at Washington College kind of steered me towards public health. And so interestingly enough, as I said, I was a political science major, and I did a semester in Annapolis in the legislature through Washington College and political science department. And I was assigned to the a senator from Prince George's County. And I remember one day when there was going to be a huge hearing about helmet laws. Whether at the time Maryland did not mandate you had to wear a helmet when on a motorcycle. And what was interesting was you had this group of individuals who thought it was, an attack on their freedom. But then you looked at it from a public health point of view, where you had emergency room doctors and insurance companies and people saying that people were suffering severe head traumas. A lot of these people didn't have insurance. They were coming on the rolls. So it was this interesting kind of mixture of public health and economics and politics, much like we see nowadays, kind of all converging together. And that was kind of an impetus for moving in towards public health.
So I had a couple of great professors that I had classes with my freshman, sophomore year, and I repeatedly took classes taught by those same professors. And I always thought I wanted to go into medicine and do either neurology or psychiatry. And to get that experience, to make sure that that's what I wanted to do, I was told to have as many internships or shadowing opportunities as possible. So I used local connections from back home and really just cold emailed and cold called these doctors and these hospitals. Could I shadow you or follow you around for a couple of weeks during winter break, spring break, summer break? And one of those emails was to a family friend who's one of the premier addiction psychiatrists in Manhattan. And that led to a summer internship which eventually led to an internship during my master's degree, and finally as a research assistant for a couple years before I got another job as a high school drug counselor. So really just using the Washington College alumni was important as well for me. And just finding professors that you really like and get along with, and using them and talking to them about what your career is, how they got to where they are. And really just don't be afraid to send an email or call someone out of the blue and just ask, could I talk to you for 10, 15 minutes about what you do, and start building that relationship and that network, and go from there.
So I did something similar to Alex, actually. No one in my family is actually a doctor, and nobody really knew how to pave that path for me. But we had some friends, that offered to help. The great thing about Washington College is that if you don't have any way, if you have no idea how to become a doctor, a nurse, a researcher, whatever it might be, they have a way to do that, and they have contacts for you. If your family knows no friends that are doctors that want to let you shadow them, that's fine. If you have any interest in dentistry or surgery, actually within the past year or two, I set up a internship with Washington College where you can come to Florida and shadow me for as long as you want. And you can do an internship like that. And I'm very happy to have people come do that. And I think you kind of really get that with a really community feel from Washington College. I guess I've been out of college about 9 years, 9.5 years, which is crazy to think about, but it still feels, just like a family to me now. One thing I think not many people touched on were just some of the other out of classroom, but very typical college experiences that I really credit to helping me get to where I am in my profession. And I think a lot of people in the healthcare field would agree with this, that many of us are leaders and have to be very good leaders, whether you're leading a practice, a team, whether you're coordinating, researchers or papers or whatever it may be. But I would encourage everyone, there's a lot of opportunities to get involved in leadership roles. I was involved in student government. I was the president of my fraternity on college. There's a lot of different ways. And I think that really does set you up that when you need to be making decisions, especially in a clinical situation, you're confident with doing those things. And I think the only thing maybe I would have done a little different is knowing that now I run a business, I might have taken a couple business classes because in a liberal arts education, you can. And I didn't do that, but there's always opportunities. And I think that's what's fantastic, is that just about everything in college, all those classes from art to science to everything really helped me get there. And I think that's what's fantastic about the liberal arts education that everyone can take advantage of.
Thank you. So we have just one last frequently asked question before we open it up and start asking those questions from the audience. So the final question might be the hardest. What is one memorable experience from your time at Washington College? Hard just because sometimes I know it's hard to choose just one. So Suzanne, again, I'm going to ask you first.
There's no one. That was the best 4 years of my life, and I've been extremely fortunate that the friends that I made are my lifelong friends and family. And I don't have anything. I mean, that's what it is, that they're family. And I just left half a dozen of them prior to joining you all, because we talk every week now, ever since March and COVID hit. We've been there for each other, and just what we do.
Kind of like along with Suzanne said, there's just so many great memories that I have from Washington College, and exactly what she said. I have a group of friends that we still talk constantly. We vacation together. We watch our kids grow up along those lines. The one thing that really stood out to me was just taking time with my friends to explore and enjoy Chestertown and the surrounding area in the Eastern Shore. Like I remember going down to the boathouse with friends and taking out canoes and spending a couple hours on the Chester River on an absolutely beautiful spring day. Like literally walking down from the campus and just enjoying ourselves out on the Chester, and just kind of exploring that area and kind of becoming part of that small town feel. I was originally from New York, so coming to Chestertown was about 180-degree opposite. So being able to kind of go from the hustle and bustle of New York to like knocking it down to Chestertown speed was a fantastic thing, and it broadened my view and horizon about what the world is.
Like everyone before me, there are too many to count. But I was lucky enough to be able to study abroad the fall of my junior year, and that was probably the most rewarding academic experience, minus the completion of my doctoral degree. I studied in London in undergrad for 4 months with one of my best friends. And just being able to live in a different country and study topics that were really interested to me, both in my major and really whatever piqued my interest, but being able to see different cultures and live among a different population really helped me realize that I wanted to go into medical or public health and help different populations and different people of different cultures. And I was also lucky to study abroad again during my master's training, and that really reinforced my decision to go into public health because I was able to reach people from different cultures and different geographic areas. And my comfort to going to a country that did not speak English, I studied in Italy for a month, was given to me by the experiences and education I got at Washington College. So my comfort level, being able to travel and step out of what my comfort zone is, because I'm also from the New York area, was really instilled in me while at Washington College. And I'm forever indebted to the college for that.
So if I had to choose one thing that was really memorable, that would be really difficult, like everyone said. And I think that really no matter anywhere you go for college, most people will probably say this. It was the best 4 years of my life, and it absolutely 100% was. I'm trying to think of something unique about Washington College, and I think something that is unique, I think Steve kind of touched on this, is the Chestertown area. It's very rural, but it has it's a really nice downtown area. You are able to really connect with that, and not just as a college student. The town really embraces you as a resident, really, for 4 years, or plenty of people stay on afterwards and get jobs in the area because it's so fantastic. But one thing that I did to kind of take advantage of that and really get to know the area a little bit better was I took a sailing course, and that was a ton of fun. It was actually the same, I don't know who's instructing it now, but it was the same instructor that taught all the first year Naval Academy students down in Annapolis. And that was just a ton of fun. I think there was only 4 of us in the class, and we flipped those things over and learned how to sail, and it was so much fun. I often tell people, they say, oh, well, if you had to go back and do it all over again, would you do it, at Washington College, or, would you do anything? Yes, I would go back and I would do those 4 years all over again. And it's to do everything exactly the same. It was absolutely 100%. I'm in a room, and my husband will not hear this, but it was one of the best decisions of my life, is going to Washington College. When I got married, every single person on my side, my wedding party, was a Washington College graduate. And I have friends from all over, dental school, or, from high school afterwards, but everybody was Washington College, and they're still my absolute best friends and my family still.
Great, thank you. And good job choosing one of those many memories. So we're going to open it up to those audience questions now. And I like this first question. It's great that you all listening are already thinking about this. So to our panelists, how much work-life balance would you say that you have?
It really, for me, it depends. Finals week and midterms week, it's none, obviously, because I'm doing a lot of teaching and grading. But the one great thing about college is if you don't have time management skills, you learn very quickly the importance of time management. So I always make time to go out with colleagues. We used to have lunch together every Friday. When I was doing my doctoral training, when I was working in the lab, we used to go to football games together on Saturdays because college football is very big in the South. So we had our own little group. So we made sure that it wasn't just all work. We made sure that we were able to go out, have fun, and interact with each other and other people in different departments, depending on where you work. But, we made sure our work did get done. But having that time management skills and knowing that if you don't take some time for yourself to enjoy and have fun, burnout comes very quickly. And it could lead you to realize that what you're doing is not what you want to do. And that's the last thing any of us really want to happen.
Very true. I've gone through at least 5 different jobs as a physician assistant. It really depends on the job that I've had. Doing 24-hour shifts for a level 2 trauma center is very tough, but it's something that I had to learn. That it wasn't for me for more than a year. And so it's a matter of being truthful with yourself. And especially as a physician assistant, it matters more to me who I work with and that I enjoy my colleagues as opposed to the work that I'm doing. I always thought that I would go just internal medicine, but I've gravitated obviously to neurology, whether it be neurosurgery or neurology that I'm in now, because of the folks that I work with, because they are an incredible team of people to be with. And I'm very fortunate that they do allow me to have a work-life balance because I'm chair of our alumni board for Washington College. So I spend a lot of my time doing that and being with you in addition to being a PA. So it's all a matter of you figuring it out.
Yeah, I would say it all depends on what projects I'm working on. The good thing about public health is, everyone realizes that we all have lives. But certain studies, when I have teams out in the field, working all different hours, if I'm not actually out in the field working with them, I have to be on call. We have teams, depending on the study, that are working midnight to 6 a.m. or so you have to be on call and be ready to answer if there's a problem, if there's an issue, if something arises along those lines. And then obviously, particularly for a lot of us now with COVID, I mean, there's nothing like working in public health during a pandemic. It's literally kind of all hands on deck. We've all kind of had to pivot to what we originally were doing and kind of had to modify, how we work and what we're doing. So it's definitely a busier time, but this is why you sign up for being involved in healthcare or the medical field is when things are not going well. That's when we want to step up and do what needs to be done to make things better.
I will admit that work-life balance is something that I struggle with now. I think, though, to be realistic, in your undergrad, you really have a lot more freedom to explore different classes, different clubs, and you have a lot more opportunities to have a work-life balance, for sure. And I definitely had that, in college. I think it's unrealistic to think that in medical school or dental school, anything where you're going to become a doctor or surgeon of any sort, that, that kind of is your life for 4 years or however long your degree is. But you can still have fun with that, and the people you meet. And then, afterwards in the job field, I would say I had really good work-life balance until I opened my own practice. And I've been really committed to making my business successful in the past, say 2.5 years that it's been open there. So, but it's definitely something that, you get better with. And I would encourage everyone to just it's okay to make a little bit of mistake, study at the last minute for an exam here or there in college. It's not a habit you want to create, but Washington College it gives you the opportunity to take different classes, to experiment with different work-life schedules. Every semester you're going to have a different schedule, and you can kind of, tailor that. And it really gives you a good idea for when you're getting into these programs afterwards. How you work best. Do you work best, early in the morning, or just getting an extra hour of sleep? Is that better for you? And you can kind of tailor that and play around with that, which I think is great.
Thanks. So this next question asks, how did your undergraduate research experience better prepare you for your prospective field?
Well, I'll go first. I didn't do any research in undergrad, so I don't have anything to contribute, but I'll let the other researchers go for it.
I was a history major. So a lot of my research, I basically made my own concentration in Civil War America, like that era. So for my senior thesis, and a lot of my research was looking at Civil War medicine and how that basically started the modern American medical system and the public health system. So I looked a lot at what at the time was termed homesickness, which is really what we would consider PTSD. Obviously, a lot of people know that Ulysses S. Grant was an alcoholic and a drunk. And it was amazing for a lot of his peers to realize that he ended up being the sole reason why we won the American Civil War. So I took my interest in history and Civil War America into eventually launching my career into addiction medicine and really psychiatric public health. And then, as I said earlier, just the different internships and following what your research interests are, and just following and getting as much experience as you can, knowing it's going to be limited, but ask a lot of questions, and take in as much information as you can, because you never know, your interest might change. And you wanted to go from an MD to realizing you want to do research and teach, and you get a PhD like I did. And it was the best decision that I ever did. And it's due to the experiences and the teachers that I had at Washington College.
My senior thesis was dealing with delivery of medications through a different type of mechanism. The folks were trying to create this polymer which would be embedded with medicine, whether it be pain relief medicine or a cancer medication. And so we were implanting these polymers in animals, and then doing testing on these animals to see if the drug delivery system was as not just adequate, but substantial to relieve pain, or to deliver how far-reaching the medication was going to be infiltrated into the animal system. So I was on the very beginnings of that research with dealing with Dr. Grossman, but it showed me the steps that needed to be taken in order to try to prove a thesis, and that information was taken to my next step when I did my master's degree. Because again, I was doing biomedical research up at the AIDS vaccine program. And again, it was, a very time-taking exercise in order to gather the material, but also to show whether or not we're going to be positive or negative in our thesis proposal. So it's just either one. It's a great experience, and you take something from it and use that information moving forward.
Yeah, I would just briefly say that I think the great thing was the entire, kind of liberal, Mike alluded to this whole liberal arts education, where you're not stuck in a box. I think if you look at everyone on here, they have a totally different major what they wound up doing career-wise. And I think the great thing about that is the exposure. You're able to take a sailing class, you're able to take philosophy classes, you're able to take history classes, and kind of exposes you to a myriad of other things that might be outside what you think you want to do, which I think better prepares you for once you do graduate and start to figure out, okay, what do I really want to do?
Great. So Suzanne, this next question is for you, but anybody else who'd like to chime in, feel free. How would you recommend a student interested in becoming a physician assistant get their patient exposure hours while attending Washington College?
Yeah, so if the opportunity still exists, and I'm not sure, but we used to have student trainers, i.e., folks who volunteered with the athletics department in helping to either tape the athletes up prior to games or help with their rehab protocol or exercises if they had injured themselves. That's a possibility. If it's still a possibility within the athletic department, is something to look into at Washington College. The other thing, from the physician assistant side of it, a lot of the folks that would apply to the physician assistant program I was faculty of were paramedic or emergency medical technicians. So yes, I do recall a handful of Washington College students who were either volunteers for the fire department or for the EMTs while we were students attending the college. So that's a possibility. And then I would just encourage people to look into the local hospital as well as the local public health department for Kent, Queen Anne's County to see if there are volunteer opportunities there. There's no, you got to explore, you got to think outside the box. And the other thing is not all physician assistant programs require exposure hours. Yes, they like that you have it, but they're not all the programs require it. So that's something else you have to do your research on.
Thank you. Let's see. So this next question asks, what was your favorite class you took at Washington College and why?
I have two. My junior year, I took the Civil War with a professor that recently retired, Dr. Richard Schreiner, who was arguably my favorite professor I've ever had. And he just made it fun. He was a Lincoln scholar, so he really knew the material, and he didn't lecture at you. He talked with you. And he knew that college students have a short attention span, so he supplemented his teaching with videos. So we watched like the Ken Burns documentary, we watched Glory, and he related all of that to the material we needed to cover and made that fun. And I'm probably a little weird in this regard, but I really enjoyed my senior thesis because it was a topic I got to choose. So if I didn't like it or I didn't do well, I had no one to blame but myself. And I knew I wanted to go to grad school after. So I made sure that I took full advantage of the research and the writing and made sure that it was the best that I could do, because this is what I wanted to do in the long run. So that really was like my first true introduction to research, writing, and presenting data and research, which is what I continue to do to this day. So those were my two favorite classes.
Oh.
So I have two as well. And as I was sitting here thinking about them, they actually kind of bookended my college experience. The first one was my first semester at Washington College as a freshman. And it was a world religion course. And it was something that I had never been exposed to in that way. It was absolutely fascinating. As I'm thinking about this more, actually, I think that was in the philosophy department. I did take a medical ethics course later on in college, which I really found interesting, but also in the philosophy department. But then my last year or my last semester, there was a human sexuality course, which was interesting. because it took a very scientific approach. It was in the psychology department. It was a very scientific approach to things, but also just very fun as well with Dr. Spillich. I think he also retired, but he was an absolutely fantastic professor. But I think if I had to choose, those two or three would be my favorites.
I would have to say, obviously, a class on constitutional American government with a professor who's no longer there, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Weissman, who was just absolutely a fantastic professor. He's someone I still keep in touch with on a monthly basis, and we chat back and forth. I distinctly remember Dr. Newell taking some philosophy classes. Absolutely love them. And there used to be a thing, I'm going to date myself, called the Freshman Writing Seminar, which actually taught you how to write. And I have to say that is probably one of the most important things that has stuck with me is Washington College teaching me how to write properly. And that's, you know, in today's world, the written word, or the ability to write succinctly and professionally, it's hard to find. And I definitely, at the time, I was like, why do we all have to do this? And now I'm thankful that I was exposed to that program.
I'm agreeing with Huddy and with Mike. Huddy, yeah, definitely. J. David Newell was an incredible philosophy professor. Loved him to death. That's how I got introduced to philosophy, and he's the one I took the medical ethics class with, which I couldn't ask for anything better. And Mike, definitely George Spillich, psychology, one of the best. And both of those folks have retired. And then I also have to give a bunch of credit to Dr. Donald Munson, biology department. And believe it or not, one of my favorite classes, or two of my favorite classes with Dr. Munson, was parasitology and an environmental studies class that he took us down to Assateague to do field studies. Just incredible experiences, but more so that these professors got to know you as a human being. You were not a number to them. They actually got to know you. They wanted to know how you were, how things were going, what your future plans were, what you wanted, what your likes, what your dislikes. They wanted to know about you, which meant the world, because you, like I said, you weren't a number. You were a real person to them.
Thank you. All right, so this question asks, is the opportunity to visit Johns Hopkins or other hospitals still available for students?
For me currently, because of COVID, my hospital and my clinic is not allowing me to have students come with me to do rounds or things of that nature. But whenever COVID's not around, I'm more than happy to have folks shadow me for the hospital, for the stroke clinic. And I know that there are many other alums in their fields of interest that are wanting to do externships, internships for students. So our Career Development Center is definitely working hard to be able to help students out with that.
I know, obviously, yeah, pre-COVID, I would always host a couple students up to Hopkins to kind of just discuss and debate public health, to kind of explain what it is and how people get involved in it, and research and careers and money, and just kind of discuss some ethical issues surrounding some of the research that I've worked on. Obviously, with COVID, not allowed to, but once Suzanne said COVID is lifted, yes, definitely look forward to hosting students again at Hopkins, and usually a lot of times over the January break, I would host a group of students over there.
Great, thank you. And then I know that Mike had already offered shadowing him if anybody wanted to go down to Florida too, obviously in non-COVID times. And then I know that Children's National Medical Center in non-COVID times also hosts some of our Washington College students. Let's see. So this next question asks, how do students get assistance if an academic need arises?
I'll jump in there.
Yeah, go for it.
I think the first thing is from the professor. I think it was just mentioned, they think of you, they know you. You're not just student number 301 out of 800 here. You know, I was Mike Powell, and they knew Mike Powell. They knew Alex Hoffman, you know, in their classes by name. And they're going to notice if, you know, you're not doing well, or if you notice that you're not doing well, or that you're not understanding the material, you can go to them, and they actually like it. Believe it or not, they're all required to have office hours. And instead of them sitting there and staring at the, you know, watching the paint dry on the wall, they absolutely love when you come in to visit them and to explain things. These professors, you know, are at the top of their fields, and they've spent their entire lives, you know, becoming experts in what they're teaching. They really like what they teach. And when someone either shows an extra interest or just, you know, needs some help, they're more than happy to help with that. There are academic centers and the career centers and all these other different centers. But I think for me, when I didn't understand something, the first place I went was the professor.
Just to second what Mike said, is besides seeing the professor, is ask your group of friends. When you find your group of friends, you will all have your academic strengths and your academic weaknesses. Like I remember asking Mike to help me with some of the science classes I took after him because I delayed some of them so I could study abroad. And I had other friends that would ask me for help with some of the math classes because I'm very good with statistics and statistical analysis. So I would help my friends with statistics. So just making sure that, one, like Mike said, go ask your professors, but also ask your friends. If you're in the same class as a friend, they might understand it, or you might understand it. So you could help them and they could help you. And then the math center was very important when I was there. I think it's still there. And the guy who ran it at the time, Reed, is one of the funniest guys I ever met, and was able to relate it to the person that knows no math and hates math to the person that's double majoring in math and physics and helping them understand whatever material is being asked.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Alex, we still do have the Quantitative Skills Center and the Writing Center. So those are both located in our Office of Academic Skills in the library. So very convenient spot for students to go get extra help. And as you all can see who are watching this tonight, we do have two groups of friends on this panel. So they all knew each other when they were at school, which is pretty fun. So due to time tonight, we are going to take our last audience question. And I think this is a wonderful question to end on. What advice do you have for someone looking to enter the health profession?
Don't feel that there's one way to get to where you want to go. Mike will tell you as well, like I had a very interesting road to get to where I am, thinking I needed and wanted to go to medical school, only to realize that I love research, and worked a couple of really interesting jobs, such as being a research assistant at a psych institution in Manhattan. Then I was a high school drug counselor for 2.5 years, to finally getting my PhD in health behavior. And take advantage of college. If you're interested in business, if you're interested in humanities or history or psychology, major in that. You don't need to major in biology or chemistry or any natural science to go to whatever graduate school you want to do. You'll have a list of prerequisites that you need to take, but you're also going to learn all of that again once you get into grad school. So if you're really interested or passionate in a different field, don't be afraid to study that and major in that, because that's actually going to help you, because your GPA is going to be a lot higher because you're going to be more vested and interested in the classes you have to take, rather than potentially struggling through a field or a major that you feel obligated to take to get to where you want to go. So there's no one right path to get to where you want to go. and understand that bumps will occur. It's just overcoming those bumps will make you a better and more well-rounded individual when the application process arrives to whatever graduate school and field you want to go into.
Well said, Alex. Very well said. Yeah, because I've had too many people come in for a physician assistant interview, and all they do is give me cookie cutter answers and can't look me straight in the eye and actually tell me about their experience or be able to speak to things of figuring something out of critical nature. And having that diverse background is only to your advantage.
Yeah, along with everyone said, you know, your 4 years at college, don't box yourself into one thing. And I think what you'll take from what we've all said is you can immerse yourself in so many different things at Washington College, and it gives you a broader view and a better spectrum of the world and in surroundings, and it makes things much easier when you move on to the next phase after graduation. So, you know, do an internship in something you might not even know anything about, or you might be slightly interested in. You know, take that class, you know, take a sailing class, be in student government, you know, do a club sport, do all these different things that kind of give you just a broader, more richer kind of experience when you're there, and it'll open up so many more things to you when you're gone.
Yeah, I think that, there's certainly a theme. And I know when I was in dental school, I sat on the admissions committee for my dental school, and I interviewed a couple times a month. I'd interview students for a couple hours in the afternoon and make a recommendation, allow this person into dental school or not. And I'll tell you that the more that, I did this, the more I craved, instead of someone looking really good on paper, to be an interesting person, actually, to be genuinely be interested in what you're going into, genuinely care for people. And this isn't just dentistry, this is really anything. But, I think taking the time to explore different things and different areas in college expands your mind. It makes you a more interesting, more diverse person. And you may find that, hey, I'm going to go this path, and a little bit different than where I may have started out wanting to go. But I think you'll be more reassured wherever you end up, in whatever field you end up in, if you do take that time in college just to have fun and take some different things and learn some different things.
Well, thank you so much to Suzanne, Steve, Alex, and Mike for joining us tonight. And thank you all at home as well. I hope you found this helpful, as I know you're considering both your future college, but also your future career path. So again, if you did have a question tonight that we were unable to answer live, your admissions counselor will reach out as long as we have a name associated with that question. I also wanted to remind everybody that Washington College is open for public campus visits. We are doing them in smaller groups, and we are doing them in compliance with the CDC guidelines, best practices for COVID mitigation. So we hope to see you all on campus soon. Thanks so much and have a great night.
Alex, it's a pleasure being on the panel with you.
So yeah, it was. I'd like to talk to you more about the work you're doing at Hopkins.
Yeah, dude. I mean, we're like, boom. I mean, the same. I was like,
yeah.
Wow.
It's funny. One of my mentors down at UAB is Peter Hendricks, and he does a lot of the psilocybin research. So he knows.
Oh yeah, which has been like in the news everywhere at Hopkins.
So he knows. He actually helped start the whole thing at Hopkins. So it's really funny. Really a small world.
Yeah, like that thing is like taking off. There's like 20 press releases a day about it. So yeah, that's so funny. So you're in Alabama, UAB?
No, I'm actually I went to UAB for grad school.
Okay.
I am back in northern New Jersey, so I'm living in Teaneck now, and
Okay.
in the process of moving into Manhattan with my girlfriend.
Okay.
Once like COVID ends, it obviously COVID interrupted just about everything in life.
Yeah.
But I'm teaching online for UAB
Oh, okay.
and trying to find like the next steps. Trying to figure out like if like I'm 90% sure I want to go into academia.
Okay.
So it's now like applying for either a postdoc or professorships, but obviously with COVID still going on, no one's sure what the finances are going to be
Yeah.
going forward. So doing the teaching